won't, because he's had 4. Potter Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to expand upon the arguments that have already been made in the House this evening about the drafting, the potential conflict. Are we talking about the issue of drafting errors, or are we talking about the application and the implementation of policy? And I think it's very clear from what my esteemed colleague has already provided, that when we talk in clause 4 about the section 80BA, which talks about the end of the stand-down period, but we haven't included the previous section which talks about the commencement of the stand-down period and has the fullness of that period, where the language in one talks about the day after and the language in the other talks about on the day on which the period ends, that we obviously have an issue here. The issue has been around the original drafting of the bill, which was rushed through the House under urgency. And as another of my colleagues has noted, we are again in a process of urgency to correct what may have been either drafting or policy implementation. Now, I just want to pick up on the policy implementation part of this, Mr. Chairman, because we are in a truncated process and we have not had the ability either to have the input from officials or the input from people who will see the fullness of the application of this bill when it becomes law and is implemented in the workplace. And there is obviously a problem, a concern with that. And if we had had the opportunity to do that, if we weren't in a truncated process, if we weren't under urgency, we wouldn't be heaping, in my view, a problem on top of a problem on top of a problem. We could be doing this correctly. We could be making crafting the legislation appropriately and doing what we should do, which is either to ensure that we amend what happened in 1998, or we amend the application of this policy, of this legislation, in its application on the ground. We've heard very clearly that there has been calls from this side of the House, after it was raised initially by Jan Logie and then by my colleague Honourable Ruth Dyson, that there is an opportunity for us to have the information from officials as part of this process, which would certainly add an opportunity to actually debate this more fully. The Minister and the Chair has been saying that the intent of the policy is clear. Well, we are not sure of that because we have not been given the evidence of that. And it would be in the best interests of ensuring that we get the legislation right to have that information. Clearly, it is needed. Clearly, it is the members on this side of the House would like for that information. Unfortunately, it appears that we haven't been able to get access to that. But there is a real issue with what happens with bills over time, when they become enacted, when the legislation is then interpreted by the courts, and then we have the opportunity to implement that at the coalface. Now, this legislation actually has a significant component within it that may provide opportunities to people to actually gain back what they are actually owed. It might come as a surprise to you, Mr. Chairman, but there are people who are watching this debate at home who actually contacted me during the dinner break asking about their ability to become part of this process. Would they actually be able to apply? The Minister spoke earlier of 8,500 people who have applied to this process. What will happen this evening is that by virtue of the fact that this legislation will pass, is that we are putting a stop to a whole lot of people being able to apply to this, to actually apply for what is owed to them. Now, that is hugely unfair when the government has, as it should do, made every effort to contact people, to advertise the fact that this is a process. Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman.
Catherine Delahunty.